Hi everyone, welcome to a watercolour swatching session with a difference. So I've been promising to swatch my Wallace Seymour vintage watercolours for you for a while now, and I thought today would be the perfect opportunity to do that and also to do a Q&A session. So a couple of months ago I wrote on my community tab that I was going to be doing a Q&A session at some point in a future video. I asked you to give me your questions. You've given me some really interesting questions to answer, so I'm going to try and do as many of those as I possibly can. Obviously, I'm doing a voiceover for this video. I filmed the swatching over the past couple of days, and it was so fun to finally swatch all of these colours together. I've decided to do it on little sheets of handmade watercolour paper, and I'm hoping that these are going to be more useful to me than just a swatch chart, because I can use them to make individual colour palettes, bringing colours in, taking colours out, seeing what works together. I thought this might be a fun way to swatch. So I'm going to be doing that. You can watch that while I answer your questions. By the way, the names of the colours are going to come up on the screen just before I swatch each colour, so you can take notes as you go along. I'll also show all of the colours at the end, and they'll all be labelled, so you can pause the video, take a screenshot, whatever you like. I hope that you'll be inspired to try some of these colours. It's a really gorgeous, unusual range of watercolours, and some of them even have a kind of speckled texture, which I really like. So if you like your watercolours to have a bit of texture and a bit of granulation, I think you'll enjoy these ones. So without further ado, let's get on to your questions. The first one is, how did you get into licensing your art? This is something that just happened naturally. I basically posted my work on social media, and I'd been doing that for a little while. I'm trying to think when I had my first licensing deal. I think I'd been doing it for a couple of years, and somebody came across my work and offered to license it. And that's how it happened, really. I didn't kind of seek any licensing deals. This is just something that's happened with me sharing my work. I think I always tell people one of the most important things you can do is just to create the work and then to share the work, and then opportunities come from that. I wish I could advise you a little bit more and say, you know, what to do if you want to get into licensing, but for me it's been something that I've done now and again, and people have tended to come to me rather than me going to them and seeking out licensing deals. If you're really interested in licensing your work, you may want an agent to be able to reach more clients or to be able to negotiate the deals for you. So that could be an idea if you are really looking to do that. But for me, it's only ever been something that I do occasionally. It's not one of my main goals as an artist, but it is a very useful thing to have on the side. So that's how I got into licensing my art. Just people seeing it online and asking whether I wanted to do that. So another question is, I love your painting process. Do you think you'd ever make a course? I actually am thinking about making a course at the moment. It's quite a big undertaking, so it's something that I'm going to have to work on alongside all my other work for, I think, probably a good few months, because it will be quite an in-depth course, and it will be something I'll be offering as like a standalone course alongside my Patreon and my YouTube. So if somebody is interested in looking more in depth into my process, how I create colour palettes, where I get inspiration from, how I use that inspiration, how I use sketchbooks to influence or inform finished paintings, how I gain inspiration from the world around me, all of this kind of stuff, I'm going to be covering that in the course. Well, this is the idea. And I'm in the very early planning stages of doing that at the moment, so I'm quite excited about that. And of course, I will keep you updated as to how that's coming along. And yeah, I'm hoping that at some point in the not too distant future, I'll be able to have a course for you, for any of you who are interested. So yeah, that's quite exciting. Okay, how do you find buyers for your artwork now? What's the process like? Well, I would say that the way I find buyers at this moment is, I think many of my buyers come through social media. Not all of them, but most of them. So basically posting on Instagram, posting videos on YouTube, and obviously I have my Patreon, so I have a real lovely community of people on there who are very interested in my work. I kind of think of my patrons and the people on my mailing list as being the most interested in my work, in my process, and in buying my work as well. So a lot of my sales tend to come through my mailing list, which I've been building up for the past few years. I tend to mention that on Instagram sometimes and occasionally on YouTube. I have it on my website and so on, so people sign up, and a lot of my mailing list members are the people who buy my artwork. A lot of my patrons, my wonderful patrons, are the people who buy my artwork too. I would say that a certain number of sales come through Instagram and YouTube, and probably elsewhere as well. I don't know where everyone comes from. It'd be interesting to know actually, but that's how I'm selling my work at the moment. I do have an exhibition coming up in Cornwall with Melanie Chadwick and Crixus. That's coming up in October, and that will be the first time I've exhibited in a gallery for years, because a few years ago I decided to stop exhibiting with galleries, which is another story for another time. But for years, many of my sales came through galleries, and then I decided to kind of go it alone, have my own shop and reach my buyers and collectors directly. So that's what I'm doing now. So yeah, that's how most of my sales happen these days. It's mainly online, and it's really nice because I'm in direct contact with the people who are buying my work. So the next question is, do you create your colour combinations and palettes based on images you have seen, or are you inspired by the paint colours themselves? Now, sometimes it comes from nature, so it could be some colours I've seen while on a walk, or certain colour combination or something like that will just spark something in me, and I will be very, very inspired by that in particular. Sometimes it could be perhaps even the work of another artist, even artists whose work is perhaps nothing like my style. I don't have any desire to copy their work or maybe even paint what they're painting, but there's something about the colour combinations they've used that will again spark something in me, and I'll think about how I can use that in my own work. I think that I'm very inspired by the paint colours themselves. This is why I have such a huge collection of watercolours now, and other paints too. I have a big collection of acrylic gouache and acrylics. I like to paint with different mediums, and I like to have a lot of paints, a lot of different colours within each medium. And that's just the way I am. There's no right way or wrong way. Some people like to have a very minimal palette, so they will just have maybe 6 colours, 12 colours, and they'll do a lot of colour mixing. Whereas I'm one of the artists who gets excited by seeing ready-made colours that I absolutely love. So for me personally, they tend to be quite muted colours, earthy colours, quite soft colours. I love really dark, inky, moody blues and greens. I get very excited by colour, and I have quite a specific colour palette that I work with. I've been branching out in recent years. I didn't used to like green at all, and now I'm obsessed with green. So my colour palette is always evolving, and I love that. And yeah, I enjoy colour mixing too. I do mix my own colours as well, but I'm definitely inspired by the paint colours. So if anyone brings out a new range of paints and they excite me, it's very hard for me not to get them, because it's such a big thing in my art practice to surround myself with lots of colours that really inspire me. This is an interesting question. Where did you study art, or are you self-taught? Well, I guess you could call me a self-taught artist, because I didn't study at art school, but I have had some tuition up to A-level standard. So I took art at GCSE, obviously, and I really loved it. I did very well in it, and so I decided to take it as one of my A-levels. Unfortunately, when I was in the sixth form, which is, I don't know whether it's still known as the sixth form now, but it was called the sixth form when I was at school, from the ages of 16 to 18, when you finished your compulsory schooling, you could stay on and do 2 extra years. And I was doing my A-levels, but I was dealing with a lot of anxiety at the time, and it was becoming very, very difficult for me to continue going to school, because I found it really hard to sit through lessons, and I was having regular anxiety attacks. It was, not very good. I was going through a lot in my life in general as well. There were other problems that were happening. I decided that it was just all too much. So I dropped out of school and I got a job. And I had other jobs on the side for several years. They were mainly part-time jobs, and I would try to do art in my spare time, but I didn't have an idea of really how I was going to make it my career at the time, or whether I was even going to be able to make it my career. So I considered going back to school, as in I would have gone to art college and taken a foundation course and then gone from there. But I just never did that. I never got around to doing that. And then my art career seemed to kind of start taking off a little bit. So it's a long story, but basically I never got around to going to art college, because I thought about it, but then my art career started kind of gaining a little bit of traction, and I just thought, I'm going to carry on and just see whether I can make something of this. So I am an example of somebody who I guess has had some tuition. I wouldn't say I'm entirely self-taught, because obviously I studied it to a certain level. But yeah, I never went to art college. I haven't got an art degree. Okay, on to the next question. Your bird creations are inspiring, as well as your visionary landscapes. I'm a big fan of your nightscapes. Have you ever thought about doing a British woodland animal series? I actually haven't thought of doing that, but it is quite a nice idea. I'm currently doing a woodland series, which has an owl as one of the prompts, and also a fox. So I'm kind of going into that territory. But I think a British woodland animal series would be really lovely. Whether I will ever do it, I don't know. I'm kind of not that inspired to paint animals at the moment. I don't know why that is. I tend to go through phases with things. I mean, I love painting birds, but even the birds have fallen by the wayside a bit recently in favour of landscapes. So yeah, we'll see with that one. I would like to start painting more birds again, though, I have to say. And I really enjoyed painting the owl that I painted the other month. So this one was quite a long question, so I'm just going to read out a section of it. What medium, when you first discovered it, became a real game changer for you as an artist? And how did it enhance your style of painting? So I would say that it was when I won an art award at an exhibition in London back in the year 2000. So that's showing my age, isn't it? It was a Young Artist Award, by the way. I won £500 worth of Winsor & Newton art materials. And for me at the time, I mean, £500 worth of materials would be a lot now. But at the time, when I didn't have very much money, and I mean, we're going back 20 odd years, it was a lot. And I was able to choose what I wanted from their catalogue, and I decided that I was going to get some acrylics. Now, I'd never worked in acrylics before. I was a watercolour artist, and I'd actually also been using oils, but oils don't suit me because I have migraines and I can't stand the smell of the turpentine? I mean, the oil paints themselves aren't too bad, but it's what you have to clean them with that's really bad, and what you thin them with. But I decided that I would try acrylics because I'd heard that they were quite like oils in many respects. And when I tried them, I just absolutely loved them. I felt like I had completely found my medium. I could create texture with them. I could paint on canvas, which I loved doing and hadn't been doing because I'd kind of given up the oil painting, I think, by that point. Yeah, I really loved them. So I would say that acrylics were the material that I discovered that really kind of set me on the path that I'm on now. And of course, now in recent years, I've gone back to my love of watercolour. I mean, I never gave it up completely. I was always painting in watercolour to some degree, but I'm completely in love with watercolour again now. So I now enjoy many different mediums: acrylic gouache, traditional gouache, watercolour, coloured pencil, sometimes ink. I need to do more with ink actually. And yeah, acrylics. So I'm sure there are more, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. But yeah, I love experimenting with lots of different mediums, but I'd definitely say that acrylic was the one that kind of was a game changer for me. Discovering that really set me on the path I'm on now. Next question. Do you ever work plein air? And if so, could you take us with you for a trip into the beautiful English countryside? Well, I'm kind of hoping to do this as part of the course that I'm going to be putting together. So yeah, I think that I will take you with me into the beautiful English countryside. Whether I will do much working outside, I don't know, but I'm going to show people the countryside, the villages, the nature that surrounds me and that inspires me. And I'm sure there will be a bit of sketchbook work in there too. But I tend to prefer, generally speaking, working in the studio. So I'll go out and I'll get inspiration from outside, but I like the more controlled environment of the studio for actually working. This is another interesting question. What was a valuable bit of art instruction you received? Either in-person class or online, a book or advice from a fellow artist? Well, it's a very simple piece of advice, and it was given to me by my ex-partner, Leon. I say ex, Leon sadly passed away in 2014, and one of his tutors had said to him to just keep going. Now, Leon was a composer and a musician, and he said to me that this had been a really useful piece of advice that he had been given. I've always remembered it because there are so many times during my career that I could have given up. There are so many times during each painting that I do, especially if I'm working on something that's quite big and is taking several days or several weeks. There are always going to be stages where you feel like giving up. And if you just keep going, if you can work through that and just keep going, you will almost always get a good result in the end. Whether whether that is that actual piece or another piece, it's like not giving up on what you're doing, on the path you're on. So maybe you could give up on an individual painting, but go back, tackle it again, start afresh. I feel like this applies to all sorts of things with a creative career, and it's the same with YouTube. I don't know whether I've ever told any of you this, but there have been several times where in the early days, maybe in the first couple of years, I really thought of giving up YouTube. And I just decided to keep going. I'm so glad I did, because it's led on to so many other things in my life that have been so wonderful and have completely changed my life. Patreon and my amazing community of patrons being one of them. But just everyone here on YouTube, there are so many kind people, encouraging people who watch my videos. The comments you leave and the encouragement you give me, I don't know, it has completely changed my life. And I think it can't be, I was going to say can't be underestimated, or is it can't be overestimated? Either way, it has made such a huge difference to my career and to my belief in myself as a person as well, and as an artist. So I'm really glad that I kept going. So I'm going to pass on this advice to all of you. Just keep going, because the day you give up is the day it will never happen. You know, you're never going to get to where you're wanting to be if you give up. So by keeping going, it means you at least have a chance of getting to where you want to be. Well, it certainly worked for me, so I hope it works for you. Okay, I'm going to try and do a few quick answers now because we're running out of time. How did you develop working in the lovely moody tones you do? Was it just a natural leaning, or has your palette developed over time? My palette has definitely developed over time. If you'd have seen my work 20 years ago, you probably wouldn't recognise it as my work. I loved brighter colours. I loved yellow. I do kind of like yellow now, but it's usually an earthier or more, you know, natural, muted kind of yellow. But yeah, I used a lot of yellow in my work. I didn't have like a specific curated colour palette that I worked with. So all of this, I don't really know how it's developed. I've just kind of honed it over time. I think it's come from, I don't know, just practicing and just really discovering what I love and the colours that really make me excited. And I try not to be too swayed by what you're supposed to do. There seem to be a lot of rules around art. I think even though it's important to follow some of the rules, it's also important to follow your heart and what really speaks to you, rather than worrying too much about, oh, I should have this colour in my palette, or I should work with this and I probably shouldn't put these together. No, just experiment, go with what you love, and that's the way you are going to develop your own style and your own, I don't know, could we call it colour language or something like that. Right, have you ever illustrated book covers or created the picture content within books? I have illustrated book covers. I've done that several times in the past. I have also illustrated magazine articles and CD covers. I did a lot of illustration work for many, many years, but I've decided in recent years to really cut back on that so that I'm basically concentrating more on my own personal work now rather than illustration work. There's a comment about acrylic gouache here, which I wanted to answer quickly because several people have replied to the initial commenter. Yes, I do use acrylic gouache, as I mentioned earlier. I love the fact that it's like acrylic in that once it's dry, it's not re-wettable, so it's really good for layering. It also has a velvety matte finish, which I love. And the brands I like are Holbein, Acrylic Gouache, and Turner Acryl Gouache. They also do a Japanesque range. Turner that's really lovely too if you want a little bit of texture in your paints. Yes, that's all I can say about that in a very quick answer. But yes, I use it. Yes, I love it. It's actually one of my favourite mediums. Okay, I don't know how many I answered, but I whizzed through as many as I could. I'm sorry I got into a little bit more depth than I was going to with some of these questions, but it's been really interesting answering them. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a question, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, maybe consider subscribing. If you click the little bell icon as well, you'll be notified of any future videos I upload to YouTube. It would be great to have you as part of our community on here, and it helps YouTube to know that you are enjoying my videos. So every time you like, comment, subscribe, it's really good for the growth of this channel, and I'm so appreciative if you do any of those things. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you soon.